Pleasure to talk with Dr. Shashi Tharoor, and it's today time to talk politics and why being Hindu has suddenly become so important in India. Thank you very much for speaking to us. Before I go on to talk about your remarks and the headlines that you've grabbed, I have to ask you on what has just happened and transpired a few minutes back. The CBI has listed the former Finance Minister P. Chidambaram as an accused in the supplementary charge sheet. How damning is this a year away from general elections, and especially given the fact that corruption was your big nemesis even while you were in power?
Well, it's precisely because it's a year away from general elections that I don't think it's necessarily damning. A charge sheet is a charge sheet. It needs to actually be demonstrated in a court of law that it has basis. A court has to agree to frame charges. Those charges then have to be faced, discussed, refuted, and ultimately a judgment has to be arrived at. Until that process is done, I think one has to look at everything in a particular light. And frankly, at this point, I'm not prepared to go around damning anyone on the basis of a charge sheet issued by any agency of this government.
No, while I agree that the matter is before the High Court, and in fact in a public statement, Mr. Chidambaram has also said he'll wait for proceedings and fight it vigorously there. My question really is, does this not bring back the corruption narrative back in the discourse? I mean, between Hindu and Muslim, now there is suddenly this narrative that Congress was corrupt and continues to be corrupt.
Well, that's precisely the narrative they want. I mean, it's so obvious. I mean, I don't quite understand why our media don't see these things for what they are, which is that we completely concede, I think, that the BJP is superb at managing the media narrative. But the media is complicit. The media goes along with the kind of portrayal of the nation that the BJP wants. You know, whenever there's any bad news, it's miraculous, for the government that is, it's miraculous how a different story suddenly displaces the bad news off the headlines. And whenever there's a sense in the nation that the opposition has really begun to count, you find these different stories emerging. I have very little doubt that the timing of these things is not accidental. I mean, I'm sure the probe has been going on for some time. To come up with it at this time, the lead up to an election, on the eve of a no confidence vote. You know, the old Soviet days, they used to have this joke about, it is no accident, comrades. I'm inclined to say the same thing today.
All right, let's just take a break away from what has happened on to what you've been fueling headlines for. You proudly say that you're a Hindu, your new book proclaims that, and yet you seem to have caused a lot of anguish by speaking of Hindu and Taliban and Pakistan all in the same breath.
No, there were actually two different breaths, but the fact is that the fact is that phrases were taken out of context. What I specifically said in the first example, which has become known as the quote-unquote Hindu-Pakistan comment, going by the social media hashtag peddled by the BJP and its supporters, what I said was precisely the opposite of what they're implying. I said that we don't want India to be a Hindu-Pakistan, that the nationalist movement diverged in two strands. One believed that religion should be a determinant of nationhood. That was the idea of Pakistan. And then you had those who said, no, religion is not the issue, we're a nation for everyone. And that was the idea of India. So the India we built up for 70 years is an India for everybody.
Sure.
Those who are advocating a Hindu Rashtra, I said, are actually a mirror image of the argument for Pakistan. And Hindus like myself and the majority of the Hindus I was addressing in an audience in Thiruvananthapuram do not want a Hindu Pakistan. I stand by every word I said because it's exactly right. It's the fact that it would be a betrayal of the freedom struggle to reduce our country to something it's not. And since you mentioned Hindu-Taliban, let me explain that too. I was told by a journalist that these young BJP activists, the Yuva Morcha people, who came and defaced and vandalized my office and tried to shout slogans threatening me with death and drove away the petitioners saying, we're shutting down this MP office. And then they said he should go to Pakistan. So when asked about this by the media in Malayalam, I said, who are they to decide that I can't live in this country, that I'm not their kind of Hindu and therefore I can't be in my own country, I've got to go to Pakistan. I said, are they trying to introduce the Taliban into Hinduism? That was my comment.
I'll tell you.
And now suddenly that's become a new hashtag. It's silly.
Everything to do with Shashi Tharoor does make headlines. And I think politicians like to be in that space. But I get the sentiment.
I don't particularly like to be in this
fair
space.
point. But, you know, I get your sentiment. I get the reason why you said what you did. But you know and I know, and I think the Twitterati and the media at large knows, nobody reads the full text. It's the headline that makes space. In that sense, have you undone a pitch that your party seems to be making? The outreach that your party seems to be doing right now. For very long, you have been accused of minority appeasement. Your party seems to be on this overdrive of reaching out to the majority. Have you hurt that? Have you dented that?
I don't think so, but I certainly agree that that is the intent of the BJP in whipping up this hysteria, is precisely to undermine the appeal of the Congress party to more and more disaffected sections of the people of India, including the Hindu majority. I have absolutely no doubt that's what they intend, and I have no doubt that some particular television channels and other media outlets are willingly playing that game by whipping up some of the most outrageous hysteria, having to send a legal notice to one of these channels. That has actually carried headlines saying Tharoor insults Hindus, Islamists support Tharoor, and this sort of nonsense, which is actually not just malicious, which it is, but it's also politically motivated, and it's also dangerous in a country like ours today. Having said that, let me stress that had the BJP not found two words in my speech, two words I've used multiple times before and published in a book 20 years ago, I've used this very idea in India from midnight to the millennium. If we hadn't given them a phrase they could pull out of context, they would have found something else. Now, you've seen this amazing nonsense about our Congress president having allegedly said ours is a Muslim party.
Sure.
Now, what he very clearly said is that we are a party for everyone, including those who are marginalized, the weak, those who have no voice. We will give them a voice. We will help them. We will uplift those who are left out. And that includes Muslims, women, other minorities, the disabled, whatever. I mean, that's the spirit. And yet, the BJP has taken that and distorted it. So are we now going to say that the Congress president has somehow betrayed
No, I'll tell you why I'm asking you that question. Because one wonders who your audience is. Obviously, you come from a constituency that's 100% literate, English speaking, has expat population, Thiruvananthapuram. You're extremely popular on social media. You have a huge fan following there and otherwise. And then there is this Hindi heartland that your party desperately needs to win to make this comeback. To that Hindi heartland, this is perhaps damaging, and which is why I ask you this question. Who is your audience for this?
Well, first of all, I had a literal audience. I was invited by a small Congress-leaning NGO in Thiruvananthapuram at the press club in Trivandrum to make a speech on a topic they gave me, which was the dangers and challenges to Indian democracy and secularism. And I was actually surprised to be asked to speak in English. I had gone expecting, like most events that I address in Thiruvananthapuram, to be speaking in Malayalam. But when they asked for a speech in English, I was happy to give them one. And it so happened there was one TV channel covering it. That's all it took for it to become news. I'm delighted, and I'm sure the organizers are delighted, because they didn't think what I was saying would reach beyond the 100 people in that room. And they're not exactly a very major organization. But the point is, when you go as a politician to an event in your constituency, you address the people there. You aren't thinking about somebody sitting in Ayodhya, or for that matter in Allahabad, apparently to be rebaptized Prayag. You are not thinking about them. You're thinking about the people sitting in front of you when you're speaking.
So that was your audience.
That was the audience, and that was the topic. Now, of course, when I'm doing a television interview with you, I know I reach a nationwide audience. And that's a different audience. So I hope, both these audiences, a nationwide one and a local one. This happened to be addressed to a local audience, but I still stand by every word.
I think it's a tragic affair of things when we do interviews and we start talking about Hindus and Muslims. And I hate this India. I don't relate to this. But I still have to ask you this question, because you say that this is a nationwide audience that you're trying to address in this interview here. Political pundits, people from your party like A.K. Antony have said that the Congress for perhaps too long has alienated a section of the society and a majority of Hindus by playing what a lot of people loosely call appeasement politics. Do you believe to make a significant comeback, to have some kind of a ground back on your feet in the Hindi heartland, you need to play away from the minorities? You need to reach out to a larger majority that you will need rallying behind you?
Of course we'll reach out to a larger majority, but let's first deal with this appeasement nonsense. Because you're talking about a disproportionately poor, disproportionately undereducated, disproportionately deprived, disproportionately unemployed section of our society, the Muslim population. How have they been appeased? You know, you can make a song and dance about a Hajj subsidy, which is mainly a subsidy to Air India, rather than to the Muslims themselves. But the fact is that these are tokens. They actually represent in many ways an alibi for a larger failure of the Indian state to lift, empower, educate and transform our Muslim population. And yet the BJP gets around, unfortunately, stoking up a politics of resentment on the part of Hindu majority by saying that even if there is something you don't have, it's because those other people are taking it. The bad old Congress gave everything to the Muslims. The facts don't bear that out. The Sachar Commission's detailed report does not bear that out. And I think it's high time that even you all in the media stop buying these messages as if they actually had a basis. There is no basis. The Muslim community in our country, I'm afraid, like the Dalit community, like the Adivasi community, is a broadly speaking deprived community that actually deserves better than it's got.
But if you consistently believe so, then what explains this espousing of soft Hindutva while a whole host of you in the Congress? You go to temples, your party president
yes, I do go to temples, but I've always gone to temples.
Your party president is going to temples, he's being called Janay-Udhari. What explains that?
Well, the Janay-Udhari business is something I wouldn't have said, and I don't want to talk about
that. Are you
disappointed
disappointed that your party did not stand by your statement?
No, my party stood by me strongly in Kerala, which is where this whole issue happened. And every single Congress party leader in Kerala has spoken out publicly and strongly. So I'm not worried about that. My important point here is, you talked about reaching out to Hindus, soft Hindutva. It is not Hindutva at all. There is a difference between Hindutva and Hinduism. Hinduism is inclusive. It is a faith, it is a religion that embraces. Hindutva is a political ideology that divides and excludes. The two have nothing in common. I think that Swami Vivekananda would not be safe under Hindutva, because he talks about Hinduism being a religion not just of tolerance but of acceptance.
That's right.
Accept difference, he taught us. If anyone who has read Vivekananda, and he did most of his preaching in English, so I've pretty much read everything he ever said, Swami Vivekananda's message was very much one of inclusion. That is the Congress Party's message.
So you believe it's important to differentiate between Hinduism and Hindutva,
absolutely,
which is the political bit. Let's talk about the country and the times that we're living in. People are being killed by faceless mobs because of what they eat, the gods that they pray to, and personally it's very distressing for a lot of us. But you know, and while you know, I know you will blame it on the government of the day, and this is a huge law and order breakdown as well. Is it not imperative on the opposition also to temper down this narrative? Because this is a dangerous narrative, and the more it gets stoked, perhaps there will be more incidents like that.
Yeah, but you know, the fact is, we are desperately trying to get your attention in the media to our main narrative, which is 4.5 years of failure and misgovernance by the BJP. I say to my voters in my constituency, how many of you are better off because of the BJP government? Not one hand goes up. I said the same thing in Calcutta. In an audience of about 2,000, maybe 3 hands went up. The fact is, the people of this country have not gained. We are seeing fuel price rises. We are seeing the poor lower middle class housewives cooking gas cylinder becoming unaffordable. We're seeing the chap with the two-wheeler going to the petrol pump paying an insane price because the government, the central government, slaps a 20 rupee tax on every litre that he buys. You're looking at unemployment, joblessness, no growth. You're looking at a decline in economic growth figures, collapse of exports, dramatic reduction in manufacturing. Where are the Achhe Din? This is our key message. But all of you are not, you're keeping on, going on about Hindu-Muslim.
No,
Did I raise the issue, Supriya, or did you?
No. Yes, I raised the issue, and I raised the issue because this has been in the headlines. But I will go back to
why is it in the headlines?
No, but I'll go back to Achhe Din, I will go back to your counter narrative in just a bit. But the Supreme Court has put the onus on Parliament to make a law against lynching. Do you believe that's warranted? Because there are existing laws that should ideally deal with it. Is it more enforcement of laws that's required, police reforms that are required? Because in many of these cases, the law is not at fault. It's complicit police and perhaps political patronage that it's fault. So as a parliamentarian, do you believe we need a new law at all?
Yeah, actually on this issue, though everything you said is also true, there is a need for police reform, there is a need for administrative reform, there needs to be much better coordination between state and centre. We need a national law on this because unfortunately the thing has become absolutely rampant. So you have a law against hate crime, but how do you define the law where people, villagers are given a WhatsApp rumor that people are coming to steal their children and harvest their organs, and they murder the next person who comes along who looks like an outsider? I mean, these are things where part of the problem that our existing laws have is in being able to identify an individual against whom an FIR can be written and can be specifically charged. People tend to mysteriously disappear from mobs. there is also a serious question of what the law obliges the police to do and whether the police can be made responsible even in terms of their own personal careers and assignments if they show a lack of proactive behavior on these matters. So all of these things, I submitted to Parliament a draft private member's bill before the last session, or 2 sessions ago, actually that would do precisely what the Supreme Court has asked for, namely to provide an anti-lynching law. Unfortunately, it was disallowed in the Lok Sabha, though ironically my friend KTS Tulsi was able to introduce such a law in the Rajya Sabha that hasn't been discussed there. So the Lok Sabha decides that this is actually unconstitutional because law and order is a state subject, and now the Supreme Court tells us that we need a central law. So yes, I'm with the Supreme Court on this.
Fair point. You know, Dr. Tharoor, you mentioned fake WhatsApp rumors that come, and some of us are a part of multiple WhatsApp groups, and the kind of things that get circulated are fraught with danger. Do you believe elections 2019 in that sense will largely be contested with a very toxic social media, the risk of fake news running riot? And how does one talk about, I mean, how does one look at this whole thing? Can these social media platforms be absolved of their own responsibilities? Because the moment you crack down upon them, there is also this risk to freedom of speech and expression. So how do you balance the two?
I think freedom of speech and expression is vital to protect our society. And we also need an educated populace that can tell the difference between a completely fake story and a real one. I must say, I myself have been taken in by some of the stuff that goes around. But those have been harmless. I haven't been taken in by any scaremongering. I've been taken in by people claiming some historical fact that wasn't true, or some photograph being something that it wasn't, and so that kind of thing. But generally speaking, it's the scare stuff that really worries me. When people actually say somebody's going to come and do something bad and you better be prepared, you whip up hysteria. I remember this is not a new phenomenon. You remember a few years ago when people circulated fake pictures from the last Myanmar cyclone, the victims there, and said that northeasterners were killing Muslims, and then Muslims in many Indian cities rose up and extreme groups started threatening northeasterners, and there was a panic, and thousands of northeasterners fled in every available train or plane to the northeast. And the panic took everybody by surprise. In social media? So now, because we are aware of this phenomenon, it is the duty of government and police to monitor the slightest spreading of such rumors, to provide an authentic source of information, and to disseminate themselves. Fortunately, since the days of that episode that affected the northeasterners, we do have a more socially proactive police force in many states. That ought to be nationwide.
I agree with you, but you know, WhatsApp takes out this whole newspaper ad. Is that going to be effective in a country which is coming online for the first time? You know, one small tick that tells you this is a forwarded message. I don't know who's forwarded that message. I can go back and trace that. So these are risks that our polity perhaps is going to be fraught with. Have you made your peace with that?
No, in fact, I happened to meet someone yesterday who was about to go have a meeting with some senior WhatsApp people, and I suggested that one message I would like to convey to the WhatsApp people is have an option where you can only receive messages from people who are on your contact list. That will immediately eliminate half the dangers, half the scaremongering. But the WhatsApp people apparently feel it will reduce their numbers or something because they've never taken up such a simple idea. It's not difficult for them technologically, I'm sure. It's the kind of thing that's true in many other apps. But here, all of us are added against our will, often by complete strangers, to all sorts of groups. Once your number is out there, you are completely inundated. I get something like 1,500 messages, conversations a day, each of which in some cases involve multiple messages, and some groups with 500-600 messages a day. It becomes insane. Even that you cannot even spend the time to delete the messages or block the messages because it takes too long to even do that.
Fair point. Let me just turn focus to what's happening within the House. The no confidence motion that you're moving, you obviously don't have the numbers. And my own sense till yesterday was that you're trying to, you know, expose the chinks in the NDA armor, but it is now very evident that whether it's the Sena or the Shiromani Akali Dal, they will vote with the government, and AIA DMK that was being used as a shield in the last session is going to abstain from voting. What are you going to precisely achieve with this no confidence motion?
We're going to actually
are you going to speak on this tomorrow?
I don't think personally that I'll be speaking because I certainly hope our party president will, though I don't know that for sure. But my own instinct is that it's a very good opportunity to actually put before the nation the failures of the government, going beyond what you all consider to be headline news and which have very often ill serve the Indian public. The media's taste for sensationalism and voyeurism and TRPs means that very often the more substantive issues, which are often the duller issues, get no attention. But the fact is, it may not win you many TRPs to talk about the young people who no longer have jobs because of this government's failures, because perhaps they're not watching your channel. But the truth is that they are the substance of the future of this country, and we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about the farmer suicides going up and the stagnation in agriculture. We're going to be talking about all the things that a government ought to be doing. And it's not religion or Hindu-Muslim issues that the government is elected to deal with. They're elected to create a better life for us, to bring us the Achhe Din they promised.
But Dr.
And we're going to ask them that.
No, absolutely, and you must. That's the responsibility of a responsible opposition. But you know, many people today wonder, and people who are still waiting for Achhe Din wonder, it's all right, this government has failed, it's your job to expose them, it's your job to criticize them, take them to the hanger, cleaners, all of that. But what is the counter narrative? Does the opposition have a counter narrative? What is your counter economic ideology? Is the Congress's economic ideology going to be the same that it was between 2009 to 14, which was dole outs, entitlement? Are you going to be more market oriented? One fails to understand that, and many people have raised that question.
We certainly intend to be
undistracted
by Hindu-Muslim issues. We intend to be focused on the economy. Look, you know, you're really facing two different styles of leadership here. You've got the hero on the white stallion charging down with upraised sword, who says, I know all the answers, I'll solve all your problems, I'll use my sword to cut through the Gordian knots, everything's going to be great. But we've seen how that's worked for 4.5 years. And you've got another leader who says, look, I don't know all the answers. I'm not even sure that I know all the questions you have, but you tell me what the questions are, and I will come with a deep, experienced, qualified bench of able and really tested people to work with you to find solutions and implement them. We're basically saying, you know that with us you have people you can trust who will work for you with sincerity and with some capacity. Whereas on the other side, you have the people who've messed up your life for 4.5 years.
You're not just a senior MP in the party, you're also head of the Professionals Congress. Is it safe? Can I assure my audience via you that the Congress of 2019 is not going to be the Congress of 2009? You believe in market reforms, you will believe in privatization. Can I assure my audience that?
I certainly believe so. Look, I mean, as far as we don't have a Politburo that comes up with an ideological document, and I'm not the member of the Politburo for ideology. But having said that, the ideology of the Congress has always sought to avoid extremes. That is, since liberalization, we've stood by liberalization, and we believe liberalization has done a great deal of good for India, including pulling millions of people out of poverty. But we have always believed at the same time that you have to distribute the revenues, the fruits of liberalization, to those who are on the margins, who are deprived, who are left out. Social justice has been vital to us. I myself have said in Parliament, you cannot speak of the magic of the market to people who cannot afford to enter the marketplace. So you have to help them. You need that much of welfareism that they are able to rise enough to enter the marketplace, and that should be good for those who are advocating the market economy and advocating capitalism, because it means that one day these people will be your consumers and will be your customers. But right now they're too poor to be attracting your attention.
You're actually directing me to a question that I didn't have in my list, but I think I should still ask that. I interviewed Arvind Subramanian, the outgoing CA, a while back, and he speaks about the stigmatized capitalism. And just to take that argument forward, you know, you say Soot Boot Ki Sarkar, they get into this perception management, and Indian industry sometimes, and in fact for a long time now, is being looked at as very suspicious bunch of fleecers. Are they the crony capitalists? That's the larger view. But isn't that view detrimental? Are you anti-big business?
Not at all. Soot Boot Ki Sarkar, however, was a sensible point, because it came precisely the week after Narendra Modi's famous suit, his whatever it was, 15 lakh suit with his name stitched all over it. And today, at speaking on the Fugitive Economic Offenders Bill, I spoke about the Jhoot Loot Scoot Sarkar. So these are things that we would do in politics. It is something that we absolutely have to do. But I think the serious conversations that take place on the economy, and that have taken place in the past, I think people know that there are experienced hands in this country who want to see the country moving. One good thing that's happened in our country, Supriya, is that the voters have become rightly more demanding. They want results. They want performance. I optimistically hope that Narendra Modi's speeches in 2014 implied that he wanted to move the BJP from a politics of identity to a politics of performance. Sadly, I was proven wrong. The politics of identity, and particularly of Hindu chauvinism, is all that has dominated their party in the last 4.5 years. I think the Congress party, because it is not wedded at all to politics of identity, but rather a politics of multiple identities are suitable for the Congress, we will focus much more on performance, because now we know what laid us low in 2014, and we're not going to want to be there.
So lessons have been learned. I have two quick last questions to ask of you, and I think one you almost referred to. I don't know if it was a backhanded sort of a comment when you said, I'm not a part of the Politburo member of ideology. Are you disappointed you're not a part of the CWC?
Oh, no, we don't. That's a totally different...
but are you?
I wasn't even thinking of that. No, listen, I certainly had no expectations of that, because, you know, I'm a relatively new face in Indian politics, Supriya. I really came formally into the party in 2009 when I contested the elections. I only returned to India in late 2008. So I'm privileged that I have the role and the opportunities I have thanks to the Congress party. I don't think I need to expect any more. Look, I'm chairing the Foreign Affairs Committee of Parliament, which is a very exciting and interesting role. I'm head of the All India Professionals Congress, which gives me an important nationwide platform. And I'm an MP for Thiruvananthapuram, which is frankly a constituency I'm delighted to represent. Don't I have enough on my plate already?
You do. And so I'm going to ask you one last question. You evoke extreme reactions. People either love you or they hate you. My question really is, who is Shashi Tharoor? How are you going to define who is Shashi Tharoor?
Listen, I am the human being. I am a human being with a number of responses to the world, some of which I've demonstrated in my writing, some in my speeches, some in my politics. I think that if people actually hate this poor inoffensive guy, it's because they haven't really taken the trouble to understand me. And if they did, they'd find there's nothing there to hate. They may disagree, but I'm not somebody who actually expresses the kind of extreme ideas that should evoke extreme reactions. So you don't have to love me, but you shouldn't hate me.
Let's agree to disagree, and let's hope that India disagrees a lot more, but with consent. Thanks very much, Dr. Tharoor, for talking to us.
Thanks, Supriya. All the best.
Thank you.